All right, hi everyone. So we're almost at the end of the semester now, and once again, I want to thank everybody for hanging in there through these difficult times and finishing this class with us. For anybody who's wondering, I finally had my surgery and I'm off my crutches, but I figured I've spent most of this semester in a t-shirt at this point, so I might as well finish up how I've been going. All right. So this week we're going to discuss a topic which we've been building up to through this whole class, which is why it is that we should preserve the environment at all. So, is it because we want the world to stay a livable place for humans in the long term, which means combating pollution and climate change and using resources sustainably? Or do we do all of these things because the environment and nature have some sort of inherent value aside from giving humans a place to live? So typically, we call the first viewpoint, where the environment's essentially a resource, shallow ecology, while the other point of view, where the environment has its own importance, we call deep ecology. And at first, it might seem like these views amount to pretty much the same thing in practical terms, and it's true that they share a lot of common ground because they're both concerned, broadly speaking, with preserving the environment, even if it's for different reasons. But in fact, this means that they have different priorities that may frequently conflict. For instance, a certain type of deep ecologist values underdeveloped wilderness over anything else. And they may want to allocate funds for national parks and wilderness preservation, while a shallow ecologist might prefer to see those funds spent on sustainable development programs. In fact, this is the single most frequent point of contention. It's over the relative value of wilderness in nature as opposed to humans. And, oh, this is my other cat, Simone, by the way. Um, Even when there's a conflict between human welfare and ecology, such as between developing economies of poor nations on the one hand and making a long-term reduction in climate change on the other, shallow ecologists, they're much more likely to seek a balance, while deep ecologists will tend to have like a no compromise approach, even when human welfare is going to be sacrificed to keep nature as a whole intact. Now, one thing to be aware of is that these labels both cover a wide range of positions, and unfortunately, like most things in philosophy, different people they use the same words in different ways. So, first of all, people in general, they're not going to refer to themselves as shallow ecologists. That name was introduced as a criticism, and really it would be better to use a term like mainstream ecology, but these are kind of what the people were reading, the terms that they use, so we're going to stick with them. But it's safe to say that most people who are concerned with the environment, they're part of the shallow ecology movement. That's most environmentalists. Now, deep ecology also covers a very broad range of views. And people like Segoff and Leopold on one hand, then you have like New Age types, like the Green Mother, people like that. And then there's people in these militant movements like Greenpeace and Earth First. And then you have eco-socialists like Naess, who we read today. Now, one thing that nearly all of these people have in common is that they come from the developed world. So, one criticism that's often leveled at them is that they have interests and concerns that reflect that privileged background. As you can see from this article, Nace, he was sensitive to this kind of criticism, and he took great care to emphasize that equality and social justice are a part of deep ecology as he envisioned it. So things like doing away with the class system, both within and between nations, and ensuring an equal distribution of resources, things like that are of equal importance with the interests of the ecosystem itself, like preserving biodiversity and the healthy functioning of natural cycles. For instance, Nace argues that it's unjust to promote sustainability if it's going to make the production of food and other important goods too expensive for poor people to afford them. So both of these goals, sustainability and improving the lives of the poor, have equal importance, and we need to pursue them both. Because he advocates his viewpoint, Naess is usually spared the criticisms that are often directed at deep ecologists, which is that they're out of touch with reality and they care more about like wild animals and trees than people. But one thing you might ask is whether Naess is just like expanding this position that's just kind of like this fuzzy feel-good list of things that don't really go together and can't go together. And he seems to have some trouble precisely defining what's even on this list, right? Like these tenets or these principles that he have are very general, right? So arguments that authors like Hardin, remember they argue that feeding the poor is incompatible with preserving nature. And there's many social justice advocates, on the other hand, who are completely indifferent to environmental causes because they see them as distracting attention for more important human problems. So remember that was one of the concerns that Gita Sen had, right? So after all, in the real world, there's only so much time, energy, and resources to go around. And often it's going to be a trade-off between the environment and human development. But on the other hand, Naess, he's not alone in advocating for both human and deep ecological causes. And it could be argued that any position that calls for a deep respect of unity for the planet as a whole is going to come hand in hand with a feeling of responsibility and unity with other humans. So in any case, although Naess is often credited with the start of the deep ecology movement, in the United States it really goes back to Leopold, who we looked at last week. And in fact, Naess often had to take care to distance his views from those of Leopold, because Leopold implied that what was needed was a strong central authority or even totalitarian control to safeguard the ecology. And Naess, on the other hand, had political views that were pretty close to anarchist. But more importantly, environmentalists inspired by Leopold, they see human interests as coming in distinctly second to ecological ones, and they see people like Naess as being naive for believing that those interests can be treated equally. So in any case, this is an issue that we're going to discuss more later this week, but for now, there's one more thing I want you to think about, and that's why should we care about nature or biodiversity or the ecosystem at all? Now, that might seem like an odd question because most of us feel strongly about preserving nature to some degree or another. But the question is why? Why do we feel like that? And you can argue that we care about humans because they suffer. We know other humans can suffer and we want to prevent this. And we care about non-human animals for the same reason. And, maybe even plants like trees and flowers, we could say, look, those have a way that they're trying to live in their own way and we don't want to interfere with them if we don't have to. But when we talk about nature, like what are we even talking about? It's certainly not something that can suffer or feel pain or have a life, so why do we care? So philosophers like Naess try to answer this by talking about individual organisms being part of a larger whole, but you might feel like it's hard to even make sense out of that. And another question we might ask is, what is it that we're trying to save? So we saw last week that this can become a very real problem when you have cases like that in Kruger National Park, where trying to preserve nature as it is right now actually means having a violent intervention into the natural world. All right, so this is a lot to think about. Stay safe and well, and I'll see you on Wednesday for the last time.